let's first start talking about how to use the PCG volume. A volume is basically a box, and it will be able to spawn things, literally anything you want within this box. So it can be fog, it could be trees, it could be clouds, you name it, right? So if we look at some of these settings, we can compare it with just by looking at the debug item right now. So this object here is the thing that you want to spawn. In debug mode, it's always going to spawn a cube. So it's pointless to put this here. The name is the child name it's going to put under the volume object that you're generating. You'll see that it's going to generate something called debug cube under here. So I click generate real fast. You'll see it generated, first off, it has to generate a cube, places that cube as a reference here, but then it generates a child object called debug cube. So let's go ahead and let's make a brand new PCG volume just so you can see from the very beginning. So if I go 3D object, PCG volume, and then let's drag this over here. And you'll notice it doesn't have a collider in the scene. So when you build your game, any PCG object here is not something that is built into your game. The only point of this PCG components here is for the editor. This is not for your game. So the name is the child name. So generated, and it's what it does is it generates that cube and places it under this this transform object. It's just a way to organize. It becomes really important when you start using PCG settings with multiple different types of objects. So in this particular case, you'll see require ground contact. What that does is it starts from the very top of the cube, raycasts down, and wherever it hits, that's the point it chooses. Now, if I say don't require ground contact, it's just going to randomly choose anywhere within this volume, anywhere. So if I click generate again, you'll see it just generates anywhere within this volume, even down below. So just be aware of that this is going to generate it anywhere. So I'm going to say require ground contact again. Allow mesh overlap. So if I click generate, this will allow meshes to overlap with one another. So you'll get situations like this. This is fine for, situations where there's grass or something that needs to be bunched together. This is what that's going to be great for. Let's clear it out again. So destroy other meshes. This only matters if you have more than one mesh. So in PCG settings, which I'm going to get into in just a bit, you have the ability to specify multiple items you can spawn, and it will go from top to bottom on that. So any item below the top item, if you click destroy other meshes, when it spawns itself, if it touches another mesh, it will destroy it. So that's what that does. So offset minimum, this is basically if it chooses a point, you can offset from that chosen point by this minimum and maximum amount. So just for the sake so you can see what's going on, let's make it so it's always off the ground. So even though I'm saying require ground contact, it should actually spawn it above the ground. So let's see that. And here we go. That's exactly what we see. Everything is off the ground because of my minimum offset. So let's change that minimum offset again. So there's a little bit of a variation there. We can see the variation in choices and in heights there. So that's what that offset minimum and maximum do. And rotation is the same thing, right? So this is the minimum and maximum rotation. So let's get things very unique here in their desired rotations. So the scaling minimum and maximum, pretty straightforward. We can generate things with different scales. So you can use all these settings to try and make things unique. Now this is also important, the amount. This is the maximum total number of points that can possibly be chosen within the volume. This doesn't guarantee that this many will be chosen. It just means that it could potentially choose up to 2,000 points within this volume. Now, for example, if I say allow mesh overlap, it's actually probably going to generate exactly 2,000 points for me. Whereas if I say don't allow mesh overlap, it could potentially generate less than 2,000 points. Because if a point is found to potentially be overlapping with another mesh, it skips that point. It spawns nothing at that point, because the way it works is it will first off, choose a random selection of points within the volume, and then each of those points will be calculated if it falls within these conditions. If a condition is met, it skips that point. So essentially that's what happens here. So the allowed angle is, this is the angle of degrees relative to the up that it will allow things to spawn. So every time when we spawn, you'll see it, nothing gets spawned here. So let's make it so it does spawn something there. I'm going to say 180 degrees. So basically anything, right? So it generate, you'll see it starts spawning things there. If we're a little more restrictive on our angles, like 20 here, it's going to significantly reduce the amount of points that are chosen here because the angle is going to be greater than 20 degrees. So let's put that back at 45 degrees, and we'll see that that 45-degree angle here is no longer chosen. So always up here, you'll see that these are basically following the normal of the point. So when it raycasts down and hits a point, it's going to spawn it and rotate it according to the normal of that selected point. If we want to ignore that and we say, I always want to spawn this so it's always facing vector 3 up, we can do that, and we'll see everything is no longer following those normals, and it's always going vector 3 up. And here's a great example right here where this particular point is going up, and if we regenerate it here, it shows a different point for me here. But this one right here, it's following that normal because when it raycasts down, this is that normal direction. And then you saw the box size here. So this is just adjusting the box size because this kind of follows the same concept as a box collider. But I made it so it's just a gizmo because I don't want it to actually affect your game in any way, because the whole PCG volume script is not actually built into your game. So there shouldn't be anything that interacts with anything else. So I didn't want to use box colliders. If you don't want it to be a wire cube, you can be a solid cube and you can see things better that way. Now, it's important to note that it may seem like things are going to be spawned outside of the box. So if I click generate here, here's a great, yeah, that's an okay example. It looks like this one's spawned outside because it's going to generate, it's going to select points within this cube. It doesn't take into account the size of the mesh. So this particular one is going outside of the bounds of the box because the point was selected very close to the edge of the bounds of the box. So just keep that in mind. So if I click away, you'll see that the gizmo turns off. If for any reason I want to leave it on when I click away, I can select always show gizmo. And then when I click away, the gizmo is always displayed. So I have that for your convenience as well. Now, one important thing here is I went over everything here in the debug item. This is one individual item or a setting that you can apply to a volume. So if I click this, I have two predefined settings here. So this one is huge, right? So if I select this, look at this, and bring this up here, if we look at one of these items, you'll see it's the exact same settings, same available options as our debug item, except now I have to specify the object name. And one thing that's very important to note here is this name needs to be unique. Otherwise, you're going to get an error if you try to generate something if there's two grass 01s, for example. If I click on this prefab here, that's what this is going to be spawning right here. So let's go back to the volume, select this. So let's look at something a little more interesting, like a tree here. Here I'm saying, hey, I always want to spawn this up. And I'm actually adjusting the scale of the tree here. And I'm actually saying here, I'm going to allow this mesh to overlap with another mesh. And the reason that I say this is because it actually uses mesh overlaps. It takes the bounds of the mesh. So just keep that in mind if you've used bounds before. It's not the same thing as following the exact visuals of the mesh. It basically draws a rough box around that mesh. And so sometimes I want trees to actually be a little bit closer than that, so I allow mesh overlap there. We can see that that is what this is. So if we click generate again, you'll see it generates the entire forest according to these settings that I have specified. Oh, and actually, because I've selected debug, it's not going to use my settings. So let's not debug this. Let's spawn it for real and wait for that. You'll see over here, it takes a little bit at first because what it is doing is it's going through each one of these selected options and selecting that particular one's set number of points. So grass 01, I say 2,000 points. Grass 02, I could say 1,000, 3,000, 1,000, so on and so forth. So it selects that random number of points for each individual thing, right? So you'll see it generates it fairly quickly here. And we go back over to here. We can kind of see that where this one, I'm only saying, hey, I only want to select 10 points because you could see if I selected 2,000 trees, that would be overkill and really bog everything down. So we don't want that to happen. Cherry bushes, we're saying 500 here. Grass, we should actually see quite a bit more. So yeah, this particular one, I'm saying 4,000 points, 4,000 points. So it's generating 4,000 grass prefabs. And I do give you the option of saying, you know what, I don't like that. We can clear everything out in here. Now, one important thing to note is if I was to generate it, leave Unity, and come back, I can no longer clear this because it only saves it in memory of your current session. So be aware of that. If you decide you want to delete everything, it's just as easy as selecting every child and deleting it. So the spline is exact same as the volume, right? We have our debug options here. We have our PCG settings here. So let's select the forest, turn off that, and generate here. And let's see. Yeah, scroll in a little bit. Yeah, so this one I would obviously need to adjust it, but basically it follows along this spline here and generates it according to my settings at those angles and so on, yada, 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 right? So let's clear that out. These spline points here, you can adjust it if I want this one to, be first or second, third, so on and so forth. And you can just follow these instructions right here. It says, if I want to add a new spline point, I press K. So I just did that, right? But nothing happened. So it says, if you're pressing K and nothing happens, select this game object in the scene view and try again. So I'm going to just double click this, select this, and then click K again, and things start working. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. That is a bug inside of the Unity editor. There's nothing I can do about that. So the width and the height here are self-explanatory. Just changes where you can selectively spawn things. And if I want to say, instead of doing the entire volume, I want to spawn it upon the straight line here, you'll see it follows that exact straight line. Okay. See a little overkill for that purchase. So be sure to adjust your PCG forest settings here. So like for example, this one would be overkill for this particular spline. So be sure to adjust it according to your needs. So let's change it back here. And the other one is generate. So if I change that to say don't generate, destroy, you can actually run through and destroy things in your forest. So let's come up here. Let's generate this forest again. Let's wait for this to generate. And this time, let's actually set up a spline so that it's going to destroy parts of my forest. And so I can show you how to do that. Let's wait for this to finish. Okay, so that has finished. I actually want to generate a new spline. So go PCG Spline. And it does not matter where this is in the view. It only matters where you place your spline points. So I'm going to place one here, here, and here. And let's actually do it here as well. And let's go down here. Sure. So we got some spline points. And let's say I want to destroy things. Let's destroy. And this is actually going to take a little bit longer because it's going to detect objects within the scene and attempt to destroy them. Okay, so that's done. And we see that along our spline, we have destroyed those objects. So let's click away. So we can see we've generated basically a little pathway, essentially. So we can take that exact same spline. Instead of saying destroy, now I want to generate this. What is my demo settings? It's going to generate some grass. Sure, why not? And then let's click generate. And it has generated that grass for me. I probably should readjust that so it's a little bit better. And you know what? I don't like the angle at which some of this grass is limited by. So let's say grass, you know what? You can be at any angle here. Let's come back and generate again. And there we go. We're starting to, I need to fix that, but here we go. The grass is generated. So you can kind of see how you might be able to combine some of these resources into, generating anything. I can generate villages, walls, custom rock faces, forests, so on and so forth. Let your imagination fly.